down. Okay. So, good ladies and gentlemen, my name is Marlon Pillay, and please accept our apologies for the wait. Our winner for today is on building effective and sustainable GHG inventory management system. And we have with us speakers from the CGE, from the SARA, as well as from the UNDP Global Support Program. We have as well Novia Putri, which is one of our interns here, who is moderator for today. So I'm going to hand over to her to present the introduction to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Novita Putri. I'm currently an intern supporting for the work of NDC and Transparency Support Unit from the Mitigation, Data and Analysis Program of the NFCCC Secretariat, which provides support to non-Annex 1 parties for preparing their national reports, including through the consultative group of experts of CGE in implementing its work program. Now let me welcome you to our fourth webinar organized by the CGE. In this webinar, we will discuss the challenges and good practices to building sustainable GHG inventory management systems. The South Africa also will share their experience on the building of a GHG inventory management system, and the UN Environment and UNDP Global Support Program will provide some key information on the support over to developing countries with respect to GHG inventories management system. And then we will have a Q&A session around 15 minutes. This webinar itself is scheduled for 45 minutes, and we allocated the at the end of the webinar Q&A around 15 minutes. So the first speaker today is Ms. Musamai Desai, member of the CGE, then will be followed by Mr. Stanford from the joint UN Environment and UNDP Global Support Program, and we will have Sanda and Dr. Luan from South Africa to add the presentations. Just a few housekeeping items before we start. Please, for all participants, please mute your mic so analysts can talk during the presentations. For the Q&A session, please send your questions to the Secretariat in the private chat made available to you through the link you used to connect the session, and we will try to accommodate as many questions as possible within the time available. Please do not wait for the end. Wait for the end of the webinar to send your questions. Send them as the webinar progresses. So, Ms. Sami, the floor is all yours, after which you can head over to Mr. Stanford.
Okay, so all attendees who hear us but or hear us, please click on your connect to audio as you would see on the quick start menu. Thank you. Sami, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me? I think I might be on. Hello? Good morning.
Hear you, Mosamai.
Okay. Yeah, good morning, everybody. And my name is Mosami Desai. I'm a CGE member from the U.S. And I coordinate the U.S. inventory. But I'm speaking on behalf of the CGE this morning to provide a little bit of background on sustainable national inventory management systems. And I think we're going to start with giving you a bit of a refresher on what we find an inventory management system and the importance and purpose of that system, and then turn to some of the key phases of that, of operating the system, and turn to some lessons learned, and then key takeaways, and then turn to how you can access some of the tools that we'll reference. And my will speak after will also provide some additional information that could be helpful in developing an inventory management system, and we're eager to hear also from the experience of South Africa. So I'll just dive right in to a little bit of background on what we mean when we talk about a inventory system. So if we can go next slide, please. Right, an inventory management system. When we talk an inventory management system, we're referring to all the elements that are required to compile and estimate your greenhouse gas emissions, and that includes the arrangements, the institutional, the legal, and procedural arrangements that help facilitate the key tasks. This is in order to develop an inventory. The system helps and supports planning, preparation, documentation, archiving, so the reporting process, and of course, finally, as you wrap up each cycle, you're also looking ahead and what things could be improved. So what's important is that the system, that's all these elements, help support updating and producing the inventory. And once you have that system, of course, this is upfront investment, but it's helping build regularity and institutionalization into the process so that you can produce this on a more regular basis, provide timely information for your own national planning purposes too. And with the system, it also helps support improvement. And as I go over time, I think the goal is that the system also helps you reduce costs. Because the system gives a starting point for teams. So I think we're at the point where countries have produced several inventories, so still building capacity, but some elements may be developing. So next slide. So a little bit deeper into what we mean into some of these steps. The system is supporting you in doing. So we can continue to the next slide. For the key stage inventory planning. So when we're talking about planning, what is the system helping you do? So the system, when we're talking about inventory planning, this is identifying first the institutions that need to be involved. So first with who will be leading the compilation and coordination process, and defining the responsibilities, whether that's the sectoral roles or review roles, the election roles. Those are the type of arrangements that are involved in planning. It's also developing the procedures and how you will to standardize the work. So that's something to consider as well in the planning process. Also in the planning process is developing the schedule and time frame. On what schedule are we producing the inventory, and when do others contribute have to provide information? What is the timetable for that, and also for review? All those things need to be integrated. And this also involves the design and creating the procedures for managing the information and data, and how you're going to retain that information moving forward. So these are the planning elements. There are a number of tools that can assist you with greenhouse gas inventory planning from the CGE. There are a number of materials on establishing institutional arrangements, but also I think designing procedures as well for archiving, QA/QC, inventory improvement planning. There are a number of templates and tools that are available, and these are hyperlinks to the right-hand box. So once we finish this webinar, these will be posted, and you hope you can use this webinar to access these materials as well. There's also e-learning. There's this CGE e-learning program. So that's a way to also to get patients to walk through those. I'm developing a greenhouse gas inventory, but it also includes a course on inventory management systems. You can dive deeper there. Another useful tool that's been developed on setting up and enhancing technical teams comes from GIZ. That's also, I believe, available on the Global Support Program website, which my colleague from UNF will talk about later. There's a toolkit that USAID has developed that's available, and a useful manual that's been around for a while is called Managing the Inventory Development Process from UNDP. Again, I'm going into these a little bit detail now, but these are tools will apply across a number of the elements for developing your inventory system. So next, we'll go to inventory preparation. Planning phase, where you're laying out what needs to be done and how it needs to be done, and who will do it. Then the next stage is inventory preparation. So as I dive into inventory preparation, this is actually the step of compiling the estimate. So choosing, collecting the data to apply methods, but then also implementing the procedures that you've defined in your planning step. So, of course, key tools and references for this step, and I think the final step of this inventory preparation process is really important, the documentation. This is a key part of the system, and to the extent that you do have a report and a well-documented inventory, that's certainly going to save effort as you move forward. So again, there's a little bit of investment up front, but this can help make producing future inventories easier. So that's something to consider. And we've tried to reference where in the guidance you can find more information so that it's easier to navigate the guidelines. We know that's a lot to navigate. So we've tried to provide some references to help you these tasks. And tools, of course, they're the guidelines. There's also the IPCC inventory software, which is designed to follow the 6 guidelines. That software is another useful tool to help manage information and can facilitate the estimation process and does integrate default methods and default data. So that's something, certainly, as you're building your system, could be a very useful tool. We also have relevant CGE materials here again that could be useful. Questions? Sorry, I'm hearing. Do we have? I'll keep going. So turn to management. I feel with all these stages, there's a little bit of overlap. So the next slide is inventory management, I believe. And there's a bit of overlap between preparation and management, and I think the management encompasses some of those other that I outlined on that first slide when we were talking about an inventory management system. So you're implementing a lot of the procedures for review, or consultation that you had considered in the planning stage, finalizing the report and bidding it, and then, of course, communicating that information. And this is implementation of a lot of the planning and procedures at the first step. And a key step of inventory management is archiving all the results and information that went into producing the report, and that can include also communication. And then, of course, turning to the inventory improvement plan. How are you, or whatever is appropriate for national context, what is based on the cycle that you want to turn to improve. Again, the tools I mentioned are all fairly complementary and can work together, and they're not lengthy either, so I will iterate that. It could be useful in thinking about these stages and help you implement and develop the plans and the procedures and management components of your system. So I'll pause, and we're going to turn next to best practices and lessons learned. And a lot of these lessons learned we're gathering from feedback from surveys done by the CGE and the global support programs through the implementing agencies. So we're providing sort of a broad overview of the lessons learned. And I don't think these are all encompassing, but we'll hear more, I think, from South Africa on some of these in their context as well. The lessons learned span, establishing arrangements, reflect choosing who will compile the inventory and coordinate that process. They also relate to the importance of stakeholder involvement, and then thinking about institutional capacity building in addition to technical capacity building. Lessons learned that we hear about is that in different contexts, it may be important to have a more formal legal arrangement. And this would be very helpful for the agency a clear mandate, for giving other institutions clear roles in contributing to the inventory, whether that's supporting us or providing data. It provides a basis for the institution leading that process to implement its work. It can also help facilitate, so there's this odd arrangement that could be important. You can also consider might be a need to have arrangements specific to collection. So it may be that certain data is easily available, but data may not be, and for that you may need a more formal process. Important considerations as you're planning your inventory system and developing it. Of course, all these legal and formal mandates are only effective if they're implemented and can be supported, so also important considerations. So in some countries we have informal arrangements and those can work as well, so it is on your national context, but I know a number of countries have developed more formal bases, so there are good examples in the tools that I referenced to learn more about these. So next, turn to next lesson learned. Next slide. This turns to, I think, considering how you designate the agency that will lead the inventory compilation process and will be sort of operating the inventory management system and be a key lead in maintaining that system. Turn to the next slide. Thank you. So some considerations we've got here, lessons learned from the feedback that we've gotten on choosing and maintaining an appropriate agency to consider. I think one consideration, and maybe I'm not going to go in the order that these are laid out, but it's also which institution sort of has the expertise and capacity to do this work. Is there an institution that has some capacity and some similar mandate that makes sense? So that's an important consideration. Has done some work. Also, does the institution have well placed to convene necessary arrangements to produce the report and implement the work? That is another consideration. Does it have the mechanisms to facilitate any interministerial coordination or interagency tasks? So that's another important consideration. Thinking about which institution should be leading the compilation work. So there's some other considerations here. I'm not going to walk through everything in the interest of time. And stakeholder involvement. I think this is one where we all agree that raising awareness and communicate to stakeholders what the report is, why you're doing it, why you're producing it, and how it can be used is very important. Engaging stakeholders early on in the process is important. And this is important specifically for those who are going to be actually working on the report and contributing, whether it's data or analysis or review. And it's also important to convey what the priorities are. I consistently saw across a number of I think doubts that I've seen are that it's really important to be clear about the roles and responsibilities and schedules and the expectations early on. So to the extent that this can be done through the planning process, the outputs from the planning process can be conveyed very clearly. Also involving others in that planning to make sure that it's that these roles and responsibilities are clear and they understand and can follow through on those. Certainly recognizing those that contribute to inventory is also important, and for to continue the contributions as well. It's also in the planning process, making sure that you think about who needs to be involved, how they need to be involved, and how they can be supported, and are there any arrangements to facilitate that involvement. We're finding, what I'm seeing and hearing from a number of countries is that there is increasing engagement with institutions, in particular academic institutions, to provide expertise and input, whether it be training, content training, or review. I think those roles are all important in supporting the inventory system. So going just government and official institutions. So turning to the final sort of bin of lessons learned, I think we think that's important, that there's a lot of learning that occurs from the compilation process. And when expertise, I think this is something we all have pride in building our inventory system, that we don't all the expertise in our institutions, and we do have small teams within certain institutions that may be leading the work. So there's a necessity to go outside and access expertise. But when we rely solely on that expertise, it can impede the retention of knowledge and capacity gains that can be gained as you produce the report. So internal capacity can help avoid that reliance and help also build that capacity such that it facilitates and supports more regular reporting and retention of knowledge within the institutions, and also you also to in the report. And part of that is also robust archiving and documentation of the process, so that if people do, to the extent that we can't avoid everybody leaving on new opportunities when they're working on the inventory, but to the extent this does become a regular activity of the institution, is also useful in helping to retain that expertise. But to the extent that we also have good documentation on archives of how we compiled the report and the information that went into it, and the decisions and rationale behind that, can help others step in as others leave. So those are all key considerations and lessons learned into building institutional and technical capacity and retaining it. And hopefully maybe my colleagues from South Africa will have some other thoughts on this as well. So I think slide. And this is just, and I think we'll probably have some more takeaways after the other presentations. And it's, I think, one thing that we mentioned earlier in terms of communication. It's important to recognize, and I think I do hear this is an important report and provides a broader analysis, has a number of benefits that just go beyond reporting to the UN, that are important for national planning purposes, and have other data that can be useful for analyses as well. And to the extent that you have a well-constructed inventory with enough information to understand how you prepared it, it's a useful starting point for future teams and can save some costs in future cycles to the extent that you have this information. And the arrangements are going to vary for each country depending on national circumstances, and we'll hear a little bit from South Africa, probably from their perspective as well. And you start somewhere, but it's going to evolve over time, and there isn't one model that works for everybody. From one last slide, the institutional and technical capacity are important for building your management system. There's that the management system that you design and build can help support retention of the capacity and information, so that, right, true, to the extent that we know that people will be leaving to seek other opportunities, we still have the information and can produce the next report. So the key things to think about in designing the system. Communicating early with stakeholders, also communicating to leadership within the coordinating body to keep them regularly updated on the findings and how the information is being used is very useful. I think we recognize that as we're improving inventories, the role of
we are having some audio connection. So what we'll do is we will move on to Stanford, to the next presentation that will be provided by Stanford.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you,
Yes, Stanford, we
Stanford.
can hear you.
Okay, that's great. My internet is quite sporadic, but fortunately my presentation is not very long. So I think I completely agree with you that I should just try to quickly give my presentation before things go wrong again on my side. So it's great to be part of this event today. And basically, as I was introduced, what I need to do is to explain to whoever is on this event, what actually Global Support Program does, and just to give a very brief introductory sort of remarks on what a Global Support Program is. I believe most of you do what Global Support Program is. Incidentally, Malan, I can't see slides on the screen. Hello?
Yes, can you see the slides now?
Okay, just hold on. Let me see. No, not yet, unfortunately. I'll see them. I can just use them because I also have my slides on the screen. So let's go to mine and I'll use those. I'll tell you when to go to the next slide. I can see them now.
Okay.
All right, great. Thanks. So my name is Stanford Mwakasonda. Let's move to the next slide, please. Okay, the script is pretty tiny, so I'll still use my slides, please, if you don't mind. I'll tell you when to move to the next slide. Okay, so Global Support Program, GSP in short, is a joint event. It's a joint event. It's a program that is being managed by the Environment and UNDP. It was initiated. The whole starting of GSP was to provide technical, support to countries in terms of their reporting of climate change to UNFCCC. So basically, anything that has anything to do with the national climate change reporting is something that will provide technical support on. For example, things like national communications in general, BR. But then, of course, the moment you mention this, means that any input that goes into these aggregated reports is something that we provide technical assistance. And of course, there are quite a time when this element of reporting was included when countries were preparing INDC, and this is an addition that was made to GSP in terms of its core programs, whereby we were also asked to make sure that we support the countries in preparation of INDCs. And once the INDCs had been prepared, we continued to provide support to countries and move towards the implementation of INDCs. The approach that we use in providing such support to countries is very much in line with what CGE has been doing. But we go a step further. In addition to organizing regional workshops, we also organize national workshop. We can actually, at the request of a country, we can actually go to the country and provide support in that particular country. Right? CGE usually, of course, will provide support, especially on training on a regional basis. But GSP actually takes it a step further. And of course, apart from these national training workshops, regional training workshops, of course, we run quite a number of online courses, etc. Global Support Program, remember that this is a joint program between UNEP, UN Environment, UNDP. It has an advisory committee that is composed of representatives from the UN environment itself, from UNDP, from UCC, from JAF. Is basically we get our funding from JAF. So there is somebody from JAF that is sitting on the GSP advisory committee, as well as CGE. Usually the CGE chair is also a member of the project steering committee. Next slide, please. This is basically your GSP in short. But I've mentioned a couple of the type of support that we provide. Yes, like say the regional training workshops, including, for example, how to actually, for example, make sure that you have a robust institutional arrangement. So the workshops can have any topic query. It just depends. From time to time, we run surveys to determine what the needs in a particular country or in the region are, and then of course we run training workshops according to the needs. And in addition to that, we have been we have had an initiative where we thought that the technical support to countries might be best achieved when we have what we call regional MRV networks. Some of them might participate in a number of workshops that we have organized, where we try to bring countries together. We try to have a cluster of countries based on, it might be geographical reasons, it could be any other factors, and then try to make sure that we have a regional cooperation in terms of capacity, which comprises a number of countries in that region. And this can also be very useful in terms of facilitating bilateral technical cooperation between countries. So this is an approach that we have been very much upfront in terms of trying to run needs assessment in collaboration with the countries. Because you need to start from when you organize your terms of reference for the different studies. So we do support countries, especially when they are preparing terms of reference. For example, if it's a national communication, if it's a mitigation assessment study. So we get to advise and in certain cases guide the country in terms of what must be included or what needs to be included in those terms of reference. And so, for example, the draft reports are available. We try to come in once again in terms of reviewing those reports, a way of giving some kind of a quality assurance to make sure that all the key issues have been covered, and they have been covered in accordance with the standing guidelines for reporting such items. And if the country maybe feels that yes, we do need your support, but it's necessary for us to attend a regional training or to have a national training workshop, but we would like to assist in identifying experts that can work with us. That's another thing that we do support the countries. In addition to organizing our own workshop as GSP, we also provide support in terms of resource persons to workshops that have been organized by our organizations that provide capacity building. But it could be CGE, of course. With CGEs, we work very much hand in hand with the CGE, work with universities, but organizations, if they feel that, okay, GSP, you have this expertise, could you also join us to run a workshop as a resource people? Then, of course, we do participate in such kind of events. Okay, the whole objective, like I said, is to make sure that we provide capacity to the countries to the extent that, at the end of the day, we have very robust, sort of reports that are coming from the country, moving from where we have always been to enhancing those reports. There's quite a lot of information on our website. You can access that, and the information can be in form of publications that we have. It can be in form of workshop reports, the workshops that we have done. It can be, of course, just training workshops that we have run, etc. So future, because GSP was basically, formulated on the basis of the convention, but now we have moved to the Paris Agreement. It's not like we are going to remain stagnant. We are beginning to sort of align the support that we provide the countries, to match the requirements of the Paris Agreement. Of course, we don't know the full details of how things are going to be, under the base of government. The rule book is not quite complete, but it's not like we are going to remain behind. Of course, we also recognize that most of the things will remain the same in terms of technical issues, submission of reports, but the modalities might change, and then we are quite prepared for that, and we are trying to align our such capacity building, in effort and initiative in line with the bodies that will be formed under the Paris Agreement. With that, that's all I had for you, ladies and gentlemen. And if there are questions, I think there will be an opportunity later. I'll be quite happy to respond to those questions. Thanks very much.
So, Stanford. So now we will move on to the team from South Africa, which is Dr. Leon Stevens and Sandra Mochoneri. And we'll now give the floor.
Hello? Hello?
Sandra, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, I will be presenting on behalf of the South African Department of Environmental Affairs in our experiences, challenges, as well as lessons learned in setting up our national greenhouse gas inventory management system. Next, please. In terms of the background, the Department of Environmental Affairs is responsible for the coordination as well as the management of climate change-related information. This applies to information on mitigation, adaptation, as well as the monitoring and evaluation programs. And this includes the creation and the update of greenhouse gas inventories. They do work with our relevant agencies as well as other government ministries that contribute to the compilation of the South African GHG inventory. Provision of data as well as the exchange is mostly driven through the use of tools like memorandum of understanding as well as the agreements that we have with the industry and the ministries, as well as the mandatory greenhouse gas reporting regulations that were launched in 2017. So the slide that is on the screen now just shows the information flows for the different sectors of inventory. So we have different data providers that contribute to compilation of the energy sector inventory, the industrial process, other product use, the AFOLI sector, as well as the waste sector. So to name a few, you would have, like in the energy sector, you have the Department of Energy, you have the Department of Mineral Resources, you have ESCOM, you have the Chamber of Mines, you also have Coltech and the others that I mentioned there, like CESO. And in the IPPU sector, you have the Business Unit of South Africa, you have the Department of Mineral Resources. We all work within the department as well, and then Coltech as well as the others mentioned there. And in the AFOLU sector, we have the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, and as well as the others that I mentioned there, including the Agricultural Research Council. And in the waste sector, we have our statistics department that assists in this information. And then we have the Department of Water Affairs, and then we also have the waste unit within the department. So those are some of the agencies as well as the organizations that assist us with the provision of data for compilation of our inventory. And the coordination of our inventories within the Department of Environmental Affairs, the Chief Directorate that is called the Climate Change Monitoring and Evaluation Chief Directorate. And then within that Chief Directorate, we have a subunit or a sub-directorate that is responsible for compilation of the inventory. Next slide, please. So how gas inventory evolved in South Africa. We have produced 4 inventories so far, 2 that were produced for reporting in national communications and the other ones in biennial update report. So the latest inventory that we have published so far is our 5th one, which covered the time series of 2000 to 2012. The inventory was published as a summary to South Africa's 2nd BUR in December 2017, and we also submitted a fully fledged national inventory report in February 2018 to the UNDP. And currently, we are busy with our 6th national inventory report, which will cover the time series of 2000 to 2015. And then the plan is to improve over time and be able to develop inventories annually, starting from 2019 as our national climate change response policy. So I've mentioned in our initial national communication, we covered the years 1990 and 1994, and we used the revised 1996 IPC guidelines as well as the good practice guidance. Our 2nd national communication, we used the inventory for the year 2000, and we had already progressed to the 2006 IPCC guidelines. Our first annual update report, that's where we did the time series of 2000 to 2010, and then we used the 2006 IPCC guidelines. With 2nd BUR with the time series of 2000 to 2012, and we also used the 2006 IPCC guidelines. Currently, we are busy with the 6th, as I mentioned, that covers the 2000 to 2015 time series, and this will also be included in our 3rd biennial update report, which we are hopefully planning to submit at the end of this year. Next slide, please. With the key changes that have been experienced in compiling our GHG inventories, collection of data still presents a significant challenge. There's a lot of formality in the data collection process. We do have some MOUs with certain organizations, but with for an example, other government departments like other ministries, it's on the agreement of government to government. So that is not formalized fully. That presents its own set of challenges. And the data that we collect is often aggregated level and rather than at point or direct sources. So you have data that is aggregated and that presents a challenge in making use of the higher tier method. To perform data uncertainty analysis on data that is already published, because if there's data that is already published, then it poses challenges in terms of doing uncertainty analysis. Accuracy of the data, particularly from individual plans and industry associations, the data that is available there is not always completely accurate. We also have some changes around country-specific methodologies and emission factors. We have been doing a greenhouse gas improvement program where we develop country-specific emission factors for certain sectors and subsectors to help us in improving the quality and accuracy of our inventory. But we have experienced some challenges around that. Institutional memory and data losses with loss of personnel. We haven't had like a fully functional data inventory management system. You'll find that personnel that are working on the inventory, when they leave, then they leave with the data, or you know, then that data somewhat gets lost because it was not like proper archived. And the availability of human resources, we're very restrained in terms of our capacity. We have very restrained human resources to manage the inventory compilation process. We also have a new launched mandatory greenhouse gas reporting program, which requires having enough personnel to manage this process. So at the moment, we don't really have enough. And with the management of the web-based national system tool, the system administration for the reported greenhouse gas emissions, and linkages of systems as well as integration of systems. Currently, we have different systems that are not fully integrated. You find an ME system, an emission reporting system, and the national system that we are currently developing. So we need to find a way of proper linking the systems so that everything is put together and it's integrated. Next slide, please. In line with the lessons that we have learned, including the best practices, greenhouse gas reporting program is based on the 2006 IPCC guidelines, and we found of these guidelines very informative and valuable to our reporting program. And integrating of QA and QC procedures is always good to build into the calculation of files with tracking of activities performed. The mandate and policy mapping for the AFOLU sector to understand how best information can share. And the end of environmental affairs is in the process of implementing a data management system to improve access to activity data. For an example, the graph on your right shows us how that will work. And then the mandatory greenhouse gas reporting regulations for industry that we have developed in terms of our Act be very helpful, as well as the technical guidelines that we have developed for the data providers to use on how to report on their emissions. Greenhouse gas improvement program that I've mentioned that assists us to develop country-specific emission sectors for our key emitting sectors, and also helps us to improve on this and use the higher tier methodologies. South African national land cover changes for 1990 and 2030, the land set for the AFOLU sector that was developed, it has really helped in reducing the uncertainty associated with tracking land use changes. That diagram is the diagram on the, okay. The annual system development process, as we've mentioned, we are in the process of developing the National Greenhouse Gas Inventory Management System. This work started in 2016, and as it was previously mentioned, you need to have key components in your system for it to function optimally. So it involves the institutional arrangements as well as the data flows, the preparation of the inventory, the workflow we use for preparing inventory, the involvement of different stakeholders, including data providers, the data, the methodologies, your QA, QC procedures, the questions that are being used, outputs, as well as improvements. And then who are our key partners in developing our gas inventory management system? We're being funded through the Norwegian government, and the Department of Environmental Affairs is the implementer. and the technical support from the Norwegian Environmental Agency. And then we have the service providers who are assisting us in developing the system, the Gondwana Environmental Solutions, as well as the ETHA that is based in the UK. So our colleague from Gondwana Environmental Solutions, Dr. Gwen Stevens, will take us through the next slides in terms of how the system will function and will improve over time. Next slide, please. So you will take over from here.
Okay. Thank you much, Sandra. We will now transfer to Luan. Luan, the floor is yours.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Great. Yes, thanks, Sandra. I'm just going to just give you a brief overview of the system that we started to develop in South Africa. I think the main reason for this whole system was that South Africa was struggling with institutional memory, and every time we needed to do an inventory, we had problems trying to find all the information and all the contact people, and this just created taking much longer to put together every time. So the system is really a management system which is used to manage and contain all the relevant information for preparing the national inventory, so that hopefully we can do it in a more timely manner in the future. For example, one of the sections is related to the data visualization, which just shows the trends, and the idea is really just to show this to more people, as we are also trying to develop a public web-based platform, so we can show this information to the parent and have a bit of feedback, just so that, because there's often questions asked about inventory, and so we just want to try and get that information out to more people as well. So that will be one part of the national system. If you can move to the next slide, please. So the landing page of the national system, and on the left-hand side, there are all the different categories of information that is required within the system. This is based on a SharePoint, and so all the information is kept within the system. We start really with all the basic information on the national system with work plan, which is actually quite critical, I think, in that it was mentioned previously in the first presentation that it's important to have an initial meeting and decide the roles and responsibilities. I think this is quite critical, and even though South Africa does it, perhaps we don't do it as clearly. So this system will help for establishing what for every input there, whoever is running the system, who's the coordinator, who's the QC person, and it outlines exactly what the roles of each of those people are. So in the initial meeting, it's critical for those people to be familiar with the system and to input their and logins so that they can play their role within the system. The work plan will also put out exactly how long each stage of the process should occur, how long should we be collecting data for, and then how the analysis and the compilation and the writing of the report. It lays out those timelines, which can all be set at that initial meeting and then input into the system. So it can be followed, and then people can be alerted when tasks are running late or when they have been completed. Information on the QA/QC plan. Initially, South Africa didn't have a QA/QC plan. But we have worked a lot on this during the system. We now have a QA/QC plan, and we've also inbuilt, as Sandra mentioned, a QA/QC process within the compilation file, so that it occurs as you are doing the inventory instead of it being a more afterthought, as that seemed to be the case in the past. So it's much more inbuilt, and we also have a much better tracking system of all the QA and QC that has occurred. And all on yours and your input data sets are maintained within the system. It keeps a list of all the stakeholders, who supply information, the contact numbers and their contact details, what kind of input data they provided, where the data is, if it's available in electronic format, it can be attached. So that next time there's a new inventory team, they can just log into the system and all this information will be right at their fingertips. And this is really quite important going forward, that it's much quicker and easier and available for the new team that comes in. It has a section on methods and data sources. The methods that are used during the compilation are already complete and written out in a template, so this can also be accessed quite easily. As we mentioned in the previous slide, there's the trends and data viewer, which just shows you, which has an interactive on the data, shows you what the data is, and you can select different greenhouse gases or different sectors if you want to have look specific subcategories, so it's a bit more interactive. And the other aspects are the actual report that's being compiled, and this is a place where past reports can be housed, and any relevant information such as the greenhouse gas reporting guidelines, anything like that. All these documents can be kept together in this one place. So going forward, it is hopefully going to be much easier for when we get a new inventory team, as this has happened in the past, where we've had people now be able to log into the system exactly how the inventory was compiled, who gave data, and so it should be able to be produced in a much more timely fashion in the future. We are hoping to continue doing work on the system, and as Sandra mentioned, to try to link it to the other systems, to the atmospheric emission systems, also to the M&E system. So there is still a lot of work to do, as we are quite aware that these systems need to be speaking to each other, and so to give a consistent message. So hopefully something that we will continue to work on in the future. This is really a quick overview of what the system does, but I'm happy to answer any further questions on the system if anyone would like them. If you go to the next slide, then you will just have our contact details if anyone needs to get hold of us and ask any further questions. And I provide information on all our partners in the system. Thanks.
Dr. Luan Stevens. So now we'll move back to Mosaumi to just conclude on the key takeaways slide in her presentation.
So, can you
now?
Okay, great. So, I don't know when I got cut off. I hopefully you got me say my laptop decided to shut down spontaneously. So apologize for that. But yeah, just to capture some of the takeaways, and I think some good lessons have also just been mentioned by our colleagues from South Africa, which are very useful, and it's very interesting to see the system really sort of operationalize some of the things that we mentioned, or at least that process that I know you're starting on this process. So, but it's important and useful to see that. So, one, in terms of communicating with stakeholders and recognizing that the report is more than just the inventory itself. It's providing useful information for planning purposes, and they did have benefits beyond just reporting purposes. And it's good to keep in mind not only the reporting purposes, but how it can be useful for national circumstances and your domestic situation. And I think that can help motivate the process and also provide support. And I think some of that was it's sort of also in the way that South Africa is implementing their system to make sure that the information is accessible to users as well. Another thing I think that we've sort of emphasized through this is it's really important to have a transparent, well-documented sort of inventory and also be organizing the information that goes into generating the report and the steps that you take in compiling the report, including information but the procedures as well, so that you aren't spending as much effort starting from scratch, and that it can be also produced in a more timely way, I think is how our colleagues just mentioned it. And arrangements for data collection are a significant component. The report is driven by information and inputs to apply the methodology. So data collection is a very significant step, and how you set up those arrangements, of course, can vary depending on national circumstances, and they'll continue to improve. But I think thinking about that and the planning, I think we all recognize is very important. Thinking long term with regards to how you set those arrangements up is something to consider. Communicating internally to the institution, within the institution that's coordinating this work is also important, to maintain support for the system as well, and to highlight where needs are and where improvements are being made, both near term and what could be done in the future to help continue to make this and keep the report relevant to national needs, in addition to the reporting needs. It's very useful. I think, again, on this point, the importance of being a basis for institutional memory, or creating a framework such that you can retain the knowledge that's created from as you prepare the report and compile the information is very important. The management system should help support and help facilitate the retention of capacities and knowledge, despite or help mitigate that to the extent that that's possible. We've discussed, the inclusion of stakeholders and experts to provide input, whether that's on providing data, review, is providing input on uncertainty assessments, but raising awareness of the information so that it's recognized that it's used is very helpful throughout the process, and that's important early on. And also being, I think, very clear on what contributions each stakeholder or expert will contribute certainly is important, so that there isn't, so that the report is produced in a timely way. And as we start, we all have to rely on experts for input, whether it's for selecting methods and emission factors, but also for uncertainty. These are also areas where experts can contribute as you develop new data that may replace that expert judgment in the future or long term. So these are all key roles for experts, and it's important to as planning process to consider where experts may be needed, and to think about that in the planning process as well, to the extent that that's possible. And developing the inventory and inventory management system is an iterative process, and you learn from each cycle and then prioritize, and certainly focusing on sort of the more significant sources in terms of arrangement in the system is one way to think about it as you build the system too. So we like doing, and we also learn from others, and certainly the experience that we've just gained, we've learned about from South Africa is very useful to help inform how maybe some of those elements could be applied in other countries as well. So peer exchange is also very helpful. And I think we're to do that a little bit more through these webinars and others to help to training workshops to share those experiences. So this is really helpful. We'll stop there so that we have time. I know there are a number of questions that have come in, so I'll turn it back over to the Secretary.
So thank you, Somi. And yes, we do have a few questions. So I'm going to start with the first one, and that's to you, Masomi. This question is about stakeholder involvement, and the question says, for the GHG Inventory coordinating body, can that body provide incentive for they also provide data? because we composed of governmental experts and the JF. What is to incentivize them to keep sustainable GHG management system?
I'll hopefully understand the question correctly, and hopefully also my colleagues from South Africa can also provide their perspective on this as well, and maybe also Stanford, from working with another countries, you may have some thoughts as well. In terms of motivating share data, I think that's a process. I know in my experience, when we reach out, when we're trying to collect new information, it usually starts with an initial conversation to provide the context of how where information is going to be used, how we use it, how we publish it, what others will see from that information, and that it's build that relationship with that, whether it be a association or a data provider, and also signal where we have information and where we'd like to go. And it does involve several meetings. So I think part of being very upfront and communicating very clearly and transparently how the information is going to be used. And to some extent, maybe this is used to some of our circumstances, but I know that those institutions generating the data, and it helps to know that others are using the data, because it also gives a basis for them continuing their work, knowing that they can communicate to their management that this data is important and useful beyond maybe some of the traditional uses that they have, and the other information that they want to think about collecting. So, of course, there can be challenges. So that's one way to motivate, I think, and get information from data providers. But it's a process of building that relationship informally, and then you may need to consider a formal arrangement depending on what institution who's providing the information they want as well. So I addressed the question, or if there was another aspect to that, but I'll turn it over to other panelists to see if they had thoughts on motivating sharing of data.
Thank you, Amy. I would ask Sarah if she would like to provide a few words on this.
Yeah, Malan. With us, we found that the mandatory greenhouse gas regulations that have been developed have been very helpful in us getting data. Of course, when we developed the greenhouse gas reporting regulations, we engaged in a number of stakeholder consultations. We involved the industry, so they knew that they were part of this process. And as previously mentioned, this is not to punish anyone, but to just contribute to the national inventory report. And also this also helps the country to see how it's doing in terms of emissions, whether really we are indeed achieving our targets of reducing our emissions, or so. It's kind of talks and engagement that really help in stakeholder involvement. And also, when we developed the technical guidelines of how industry should report on the emissions, we also did that in consultation with the industry. They gave input into the guidelines, so they are fully part of this process. These are some of the approaches that we have used that have really been helpful in involving our stakeholders and keeping them involved in assisting us with our inventories. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the second question, which is about the national GHG inventory systems. And I would like to ask Dr. Luan Stevens to reply. And the question is about the technical capacity in the GHG inventory system. What ways that the sustainability of their GHG inventory system? The floor is yours.
Thanks. Can everyone hear me?
Where you?
Yes, so we did experience, we had a team and we did experience a loss of some people, that a lot of connections with the data providers, but because the data was being provided not through any formal means, there was no agreement at that time. It was more through personal relationships and good thing, and we lost some of these members, then we lost those contacts. And this is really one of the reasons why the system is now so very critical for South Africa. So that system will assist in saying who those contacts are, because it's always difficult going back and saying, who did you speak to, where was the data coming from? So this system will have that information in already, but I think that it's also important to have some kind of formality in the data collection process. I know it's sort of a double-edged sword, because when you have too much formality, some of the data providers may pull back, but it needs to have some kind of regularity, and I think that it's critical to involve people so they understand their data provisions and how useful it is and what they can gain out of that. So I think that's really important. I think that South Africa going forward, the system and the national system that's being developed, and having one spot where all the information is kept, and it's detailed information, contact numbers, details in data sets, agreements, everything like that is available within this one system, instead of having to search for it from various different people. I think that is very critical. And then, as Sandra was saying, some agreements have been set up, the MOUs between some of the organizations, and also going forward in terms of industry with the new green gas regulations, that is also providing us with a more formal way of obtaining information from the industry side. So I think with these various systems in place, I think we are South Africa is in a much better position now than it was in the past, and hopefully we can continue to build on those relationships and move forward with it.
Thank you, Stevens, for sharing that insight. Now we have just two more questions, which I think we are in a position to provide some answers. One is on how to best contact GSP, and Stanford's details in presentation, which will be sharing all presentations with the so we will provide that. And a second was on this uncertainty analysis, and one of participants noted that the SA GHG Inventory system not include uncertainty analysis. So, Dr. Do you want to comment on that before we close?
Yes, sure. Yes, uncertainty analysis can certainly be added into the menu on the national system, and this may be something that we do in the future. South Africa is still developing uncertainty analysis for all the sectors. We've got uncertainty analysis for energy and RPU. We are still putting this together for AFLU and waste sectors, but hopefully once we have more on those information for all the sectors, we put that onto the national system. I did also want to mention that the national system also does have a improvement list, which I also think is really quite important for going forward. It's really a list of where any items that have been brought up either during the compilation or during review processes, that get listed as things that can be improved in the future, and it can be prioritized Department of Environmental Affairs as to which of these improvements can be made in the next year. And it also just keeps a list of improvements so they don't get lost, because often suggestions are made and it's not done immediately and then it gets forgotten. So the improvement list is also critical for moving forward and for making improvements. So I think there are still things that over time we will develop and incorporate into the national system.
Okay. So now to the closing, I would like to thank all the panelists for joining us today and sharing the very useful information with us, and thank all the participants as well for joining us today. I apologize for the delay in the starting, and I would hand over to Novita to share some information with you. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Malan. Thank you also for all the speakers and all the presenters. Before we close, I would like to inform you that we would very appreciate you if you could fill out the survey after joining this webinar. The survey will come up when the session ends, and it will not take more than 5 minutes of your time. And if you're on Facebook, please find our Facebook page. It's Mediation and Transparency Exchange. So get all the information about the webinars and other events, and when the next webinar will be held. Also with all the information about the sessions and the record of this thing.
Thanks. Bye-bye.